Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
تفاصيل الأنباء في هذه النشرة. أهلا بكم.
6 people were killed and 40 others were injured in 2 explosions that shocked Ahvaz city in southwest Iran. A spokesman from the Iranian police said that one of the explosions took place inside a bank in the city and the other one inside the Administration of Natural Resources building.
والثاني في إدارة الثروات الطبيعية.
This is not the first time that the city of Ahvaz, the center of Kazakhstan province, witnesses terrorist operations. In June 2005, this city was the target of similar explosions that killed 10 citizens and injured others. Also, in October 2005, another explosion took place and killed 6 citizens and injured a number of people. In addition, small oil installations were blown up in September 2005. The Iranian authorities arrested a number of individuals that were involved in these explosions. They confessed that they were trained in British military camps in Iraq in order to carry out military operations inside Iranian territory. The latest explosions targeted government institutions that are the destination of many citizens, which explains why the casualties were civilians.
Some enemy mercenaries planted bombs in government institutions in Ahvaz, and these bombs exploded. A number of people were killed and others were injured.
Ambulances rushed to the scene, while rescue teams and firefighters were pulling the victims out from underneath the rubble. They also put out the fires that started in a number of buildings due to the explosions. The director of affairs, Mohammed Jafari Samari, said that the perpetrators are the same groups that are responsible for the earlier attacks in Ahvaz. Samari's statements are identical to those that were released by the Iranian authorities, in which they confirmed that they have strong evidence that the American and British occupation forces in Iraq are involved in disturbing this oil-rich region.
The Palestinian Central Elections Committee is making preparations for tomorrow, when Palestinian voters will head to the ballot boxes to choose their candidates for the Legislative Council. Meanwhile, the Palestinian security forces were deployed around election centers in the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Nearly 1,400,000 voters will choose their representatives for the Palestinian Legislative Council in the second election of this council since the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. The voting public appear burdened with occupation forces on one side and trying to live their daily lives on the other, but they have not decreased their attention to the democratic process, which may bring with it internal reform. However, many are convinced that it will be very difficult to achieve their dream of ending the occupation after the success of these elections.
يقتنع السائد لدى الكثير منهم بأنه سيكون من الصعوبة بمكان أن يحقق الفائز في هذه الانتخابات أحلامهم في إنهاء الاحتلال.
محاربة الفساد.
We want to find corruption and the security lapse. Everyone knows this. The economy and job opportunities for the people.
وتوفير فرص العمل.
لجنة الانتخابات المركزية
The Central Elections Committee continued its preparation for Election Day by training more than 18,000 teachers to receive voters who will put their votes in more than 15,500 ballot boxes. The committee will distribute the boxes during the morning hours to nearly 2,700 election centers in the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem.
The Elections Committee will count the votes at the voting centers. We will announce the results of each ballot box from these same centers. The voters will be able to know the results of the elections even before the Central Elections Committee. I do not think there will be any chance for a fraud to take place in this process. Also, the voting ballots were made in a way so that they are impossible to counterfeit. And if fake ones are made, it will be easy to detect them.
ولتحقيق مزيد من هذه
To achieve greater fairness and transparency, the Palestine Security Agency deployed more than 13,000 police in uniform and gear to the election centers. Each voting center will have 15 policemen who will deal firmly with weapons or anything that threatens the democratic process.
مظهر مسلح قد يتهدد العملية الديمقراطية.
تم استنفار كل منتسبين المؤسسة الأمنية.
All the security agencies have been put in high alert with the aim of supporting the police force that is tasked with maintaining security during the election process. Meanwhile, the security officials have been deployed to different districts so that every governor in that district will be in charge of maintaining security there.
كل محافظ هو رأس العملية الأمنية في محافظته.
بيد أن الخشية من أن تقدم إسرائيل على تعكير صفو.
There is fear that Israel will disturb the peace on election day. This notion concerns the Palestinians. Palestinians wait in anticipation as they enter a new phase in their lives. The voters are holding their breath despite indications that Fatah will win the elections. But they at least hope that a strong opposition force is born to help create a new political regime that is different from years past.
قناة أبو ظبي رام
أصيب عدد من المواطنين الفلسطينيين في مواجهات دارت.
Clashes have erupted between Palestinian youth units of the Israeli army and the police force in the town of Behlayan near Ramallah, resulting in a number of casualties among Palestinians. In a peaceful rally near the separation wall, the Israeli forces clashed with hundreds of Palestinian demonstrators protesting the building of the wall. A number of parliamentary candidates attended this event.
على أرض البلدة.
Every day for the past year, local residents and activists in the town of Behlayan near Ramallah have been taken to the streets to protest the building of the Israeli separation wall. This latest demonstration, which coincided with the nearing of the Palestinian parliamentary elections, was a bloody one. Parliamentary candidates from the districts of Ramallah and El Bira were among the protesters. They did not waste any time lobbying. They are racing against time as the countdown begins for the upcoming parliamentary elections. Meanwhile, local residents have expressed hope that the candidates' promises and pledges will materialize after elections are over.
فإنه ظل يحذو منظمي التظاهرات في استمرار دعم هؤلاء المرشحين لأهالي البلدة بعد انتهاء المعركة.
Palestinians in the town of Behlayan have been holding weekly protests near the Israeli separation wall for nearly 1 year. The Palestinian candidates are sincere about their campaign platforms and programs. They are welcome to join the resistance. Regardless whether or not they win in the upcoming elections, they should continue to support the resistance and the fight against the separation wall and the settlements.
As Palestinians marched towards the separation wall, the Israeli army and police attacked them. They also assaulted a number of Palestinian candidates and their supporters. Local residents have expressed their frustration about the confiscation of their land. However, they realize that as soon as the rally is over, candidates' pledges of support and reassurance will fade away, leaving residents in the town of Behlayan behind to face the reality that their lands are gone forever.
Around election time, Palestinian officials usually deliver enthusiastic speeches promising political reforms and changes. Once elections are over, they forget everything they have said and they go on with their own business.
I believe that the promises made by the candidates are only part of their election campaigns. These pledges lack sincerity and have nothing to do with the Palestinian cause.
For nearly a year, and in a show of solidarity, a number of Israeli and international human rights activists have been marching in these weekly protests. They came to protest the building of the separation wall.
I come here as much as I can because I believe this is an important battle. The town of Behlayan is setting a good precedent in the fight against the separation wall and the Israeli occupation. This town has also become the role model for other Palestinian towns and a center stage for the cooperation between Palestinian activists and Israeli peace movements.
The fight against the separation wall started 2 years ago, and the town of Behlayan bears witness to this. Local residents were very successful in organizing and carrying out this event in spite of limited resources. Palestinian candidates running in the upcoming legislative elections have chosen the town of Behlayan to rally support for their campaigns. They wanted to depict a patriotic image of themselves before voters and TV cameras. It remains to be seen whether those candidates will attend next week week's protests in the town of Belaim. This town is indeed a model for the Palestinian resistance against the Israeli occupation.
As the Palestinian parliamentary elections near, the Islamic resistant movement Hamas has reiterated that it is running for elections because it wants to rid the Palestinians of poverty, chaos, and corruption. In its election platforms and programs, Hamas has stressed that it is still committed to armed struggle against the Israeli occupation. The Islamic resistance movement Hamas decided to run in the upcoming legislative elections to strengthen Palestinian unity, especially during this difficult time.
Hamas decided to run in the parliamentary elections to strengthen unity among Palestinians. It wants to build Palestinian associations and implement bona fide political reforms.
إعلان حماس هذا أثار موجة من ردود الفعل في الأوساط الإسرائيلية.
This announcement by Hamas has stirred waves of reactions among the Israeli public and put the already fragile cooling-off period up to the test. An agreement between Israel and the Palestinians has been signed regarding what kinds of measures to be taken in case Hamas prevails in the upcoming elections. Hamas, which enjoys a wide support among Palestinians, is expected to do very well in these upcoming elections set for January 25th. It is running head-to-head with the Fatah movement led by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas.
حيث تحظى حماس بدعم شعبي كبير.
Fatah has many honest people. However, some corrupted ones have given Fatah a bad image. This has reflected negatively on Fatah and increased opposition, especially Hamas's popularity.
I think the reforms and change list led by Hamas enjoys a wide majority among Palestinians. People have lived the past 10 years under this current administration, and they now want change and reforms.
Hamas is a good movement, and it will win some parliamentary seats, but Fatah will prevail in the elections because it enjoys wider popularity than Hamas. The Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade has tarnished the Fatah reputation, otherwise it would have wider support.
وقدمت حماس 105.
While Hamas has presented 115 candidates under the change and reform list, Fatah has presented 111 candidates. It is the first time that Hamas has participated in the elections. According to a number of public polls, it is expected to do well in the upcoming legislative elections. It has confirmed that it will be a different movement after the elections.
حركة مختلفة بعد الانتخابات.
Well, Palestinians go to the polls tomorrow in their first legislative elections in 10 years. The ruling Fatah party is facing a strong challenge from the Hamas terror organization, which boycotted the last elections. Joining me now in the studio to discuss some of the issues affecting the ballot is Bassam Eid, Palestinian human rights activist. Bassam, welcome.
Thank you.
Both Hamas and Fatah have campaigned on, among other issues, ending corruption or fighting corruption. However, Fatah has been running things for quite a while now. It seems a bit hypocritical on their part to talk about corruption when they have been rife with corruption. Do you see changes being made in that area?
Unfortunately, right now we didn't see, in the future, let's say, time, any kind of changes. The most interesting thing that Fatah itself today is criticizing itself on the corruption and on the mismanagement of the Palestinian Authority in the past 12 years. Now, no doubt that Hamas is trying to climb up on such kind of accusations. It looks like a fight today rather than it is a campaign between Hamas and Fatah. But still, I hope that we will wake up on Thursday morning without any surprises, like that Hamas got the majority of the seats at the Palestinian Legislative Council.
Well, there are 132 seats at stake in this election, nearly 200 candidates running. This has to be the most open election since the Oslo Accords were signed back in 1993. Are you encouraged? Do you see signs of democracy taking root in the Palestinian Authority?
I totally agree with you, Yohanan, that the Palestinian people probably much more open-minded towards democracy rather than any other Arab nation in the Middle East. Look what's going on in Syria, look what's going on in Iraq and in Sudan right now. I think that the only interesting thing in these elections that we have so many open-minded candidates, we have intellectual candidates, we have people who believes in democracy and human rights, and this is, I can see it as a kind of the first step of change. I hope that these, mainly the independent Palestinian candidates, will really get the majority of the Palestinian legislative seats.
There are 1.3+ million Palestinians eligible to vote in the election tomorrow. Why so few Jerusalem residents vote in this election? So usually maybe 1,000 turn out.
See, for the Palestinians, the Jerusalemized Palestinians, these elections are not going to affect in the future their daily life. We know that Abu Mazen couldn't build, neither universities or hospitals in East Jerusalem. And people also in East Jerusalem made a kind of a test to the Palestinian Authority in the past 10 years, which in my opinion, the Palestinian Authority totally failed to provide any kind of help to the Palestinians, not only in East Jerusalem, but even in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. So the Palestinians today in East Jerusalem are much more looking to their level of life rather than to survive. People in Jenin, I believe that they are looking how to survive, but in East Jerusalem, they are looking much more to the level of their life, which the Palestinians couldn't guarantee any kind of level of life.
Bassam Eid, always candid, always honest. We appreciate you coming in and sharing your thoughts with us on tomorrow's Palestinian elections.
Thank you very much.
The German foreign minister has strongly defended 2 German intelligence agents whose role in the Iraq war has been questioned by MPs. In a speech to Parliament, Frank-Walter Steinmeier dismissed allegations that the agents had helped the US military select bombing targets in Iraq. The agents had given no support for the pursuit of war, he said. German opposition parties are pushing for a full inquiry into the role of German intelligence in the Iraq war. Suggestions of German involvement have caused concern. The country is strongly opposed to the US-led invasion. Iran has started moving its foreign exchange reserves out of Europe. It's thought to be a bid to shield the country from the threat of sanctions. Iran's central bank governor, Ebrahim Shebani, confirmed the move. It's not known where the assets are being transferred to. Some reports suggest that Iranian funds will be put into Asia. Iran is embroiled in a row with the US and European Union over allegations it's attempting to build nuclear weapons. Separately, Iran has called on the oil-producing OPEC to cut its output. Oil prices in New York are currently at 4-month highs.
Despite technical problems facing the African summit in Khartoum, the African Union wanted to take the occasion to reach the conscience of its 53 country members. The summit comes amidst increasing efforts to strengthen cooperation between African countries and face up to the challenges. Africans need to exert much effort to end wars, eliminate poverty, increase economic growth, and get rid of illiteracy and disease, and adhere to international laws. This comes as the African Union is seeking to achieve political reforms, fighting corruption, and respecting human rights.
Before 2002, the African Union used to be called the African Unity Organization. Its objective is to solve many African problems and to strengthen the notion of unity, because wars are one of the main reasons for the spread of poverty, backwardness, and disease. The African Union established the Peace and Security Council to resolve conflicts and to end regional disputes. For example, the African Union sent forces to Darfur in Western Sudan on a mission to establish peace in this unstable region. The African Union is also trying to find political solutions by mediating between the Sudanese government and the armed factions in Darfur. This led to an agreement signed in Abuja, Nigeria, to solve humanitarian and security problems. Similar peace efforts were exerted in the Great Lakes area and in the eastern part of the Democratic Congo, where Hutu rebels are active along the borders with Rwanda. The African Union plays an important role in resolving the problem of the Ivory Coast. It is also working hard to prevent the eruption of a new war between Ethiopia and Eritrea amidst an escalation in the level of tension along their borders. The Union is exerting efforts to send peacekeeping forces to Somalia in an initiative that was proposed at the Khartoum summit. Economic development is another problem facing the African continent. The African Union took it upon itself to find social and economic integration and incorporation among African nations. It urges Africans and African governments to fully cooperate with each other to overcome many of their economic and social problems. The African Union sponsored the NEPAD initiative, which has accelerated the wheel of economic development and combated many regional challenges, such as unemployment, poverty, illiteracy, and the spread of disease. There are currently 3 economic and trade caucuses in Africa aimed at achieving regional economic integration. They are the West African Caucus, ECOWAS, the South African Group for Economic Development, SADC, and the South and East African Caucus, COMESA. Each group has ambitions to establish a common market, a joint production system, and a universal currency system. In addition to all coordinated tariff and customs system among its member countries, such economic integration will stimulate investments, production, and per capita incomes. However, there are still many challenges. Africa has a disintegrated infrastructure. It does not have adequate telecommunication, transportation, and information systems. Its education system is also very weak, and its industrial infrastructure is backward. Africa is also burdened by hefty international debts exceeding $350 billion. It relies on financial loans and grants from major industrialized nations. A number of lending countries have pledged to wipe out part of the borrowing country's balance of payments while eliminating entire debts for poorer nations. This comes in the framework of the new Marshall Initiative, aimed at bringing down African poverty line to nearly half by the year 2015. In order to get financial assistance, beneficiary African nations must meet certain guidelines, such as adhering to democracy, establishing good administration, respecting human rights, abiding by the law, and combating corruption. South Africa, Senegal, Nigeria, and Liberia started to get the idea of democracy and political reforms, but there is still a long and rugged way to go. Other nations have not followed through as well. Their authoritative rulers stay in place for decades.
The UN Security Council mounted a tough response to growing turmoil in Ivory Coast, including sanctions against individuals trying to thwart the peace process. Agustin Mahiga of Tanzania, the Council President for January, said that there was great concern among members about street protests in the world's leading cocoa producer, sparked by an international plan to scrap parliament in order to spur the peace process. He added that a panel of UN experts was putting the final touch on a presidential statement expected to be adopted on Thursday. Diplomats said the statement would strongly condemn the clashes between UN troops and supporters of President Laurent Gbagbo. They added that it would also stress that individual sanctions would be imposed on any Ivorian party standing in the way of the peace process or inciting hatred. Bangladeshi UN troops on Wednesday pulled out of 2 towns in western Ivory Coast after clashes with protesters there claimed 4 lives in the morning. Hundreds of so-called young patriots have manned barricades across Abidjan and tried to storm UN headquarters in the economic capital of Abidjan after a UN-backed mediation group called for the Gbagbo majority parliament to be dissolved. On Wednesday, they invaded the state television, demanding their message be broadcast, a management source said, adding police had let them in, but they had been unable to enter offices in the building and were now gathered peacefully outside. The protesters demanded the withdrawal of the 7,000-strong UN peacekeeping force and the 4,000 French troops backing them. South Africa urged Western governments to seek dialogue with Iran to reduce tensions in a standoff over Tehran's planned use of nuclear technology. The announcement was made by the South African Foreign Ministry after talks between Deputy Foreign Minister Aziz Bahad and his Iranian counterpart Mahdi Mustafavi. South Africa, which has close ties with Iran, is one of Tehran's main allies in the UN International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, and has said Iran has the right to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. Mustafavi earlier briefed Bahad and other South African officials on Tehran's nuclear plans. Iran denies U.S. accusation that it wants to use its nuclear facilities to make bombs and says its atomic ambitions are limited to generating electricity. South Africa said it would work within the context of the IAEA and Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty to find a solution to the Iran problem. The United States and the European Union have demanded Iran scrap nuclear fuel work, including uranium enrichment, a process that can be used to make bomb-grade or reactor fuel. South Africa abandoned its nuclear arms program before the end of apartheid in 1994. It fiercely opposes forcing nations to abandon uranium enrichment, fearing that could hurt its own commercial enrichment activities, which supply the nuclear power industry. U.S. First Lady Laura Bush met Nigerian President Olusegun Obasanjo and announced that U.S. government will provide more than $163 million this year to fight HIV/AIDS in Nigeria. Nigeria has about 3.5 million people living with AIDS virus. Many local U.S.-based and international NGOs are criticizing the funding policy, arguing that it has conditions and goes to organizations which mainly lack experience but preach abstinence-only policies. During a meeting with Obasanjo, Laura Bush commended the Nigerian leader, who is also African Union chairman, and said that the continental body has made a lot of progress under him. During the visit, she and the Nigerian leader shared experiences on education and health issues, especially the fight against HIV/AIDS, as well as regional politics. A statement by the U.S. Embassy in Nigeria said that during this visit, the First Lady emphasized empowering girls and women through literacy and HIV and AIDS treatment. Laura Bush is in Nigeria as part of an African tour, which has taken her to Liberia and Ghana. Britain has suspended all its £50 million direct aid to Ethiopia, citing concern over the political situation in the East African state. The British Development Secretary Hilary Benn said Britain was still fully committed to supporting the people of Ethiopia in their fight against poverty and would seek other ways of helping without giving direct grants to the government of Prime Minister Meles Zenawi. The £50 million in budget aid is part of a total of £90 million earmarked by Britain for the Horn of Africa state in 2006. Britain had already suspended £20 million of the £50 million sum in June after violence that exploded in post-election demonstrations in which at least 36 people were killed. After further clashes in November, which killed close to 50 others, the government detained thousands of people accused of fomenting violence, and 131 opposition figures and journalists have been charged with treason and other crimes for allegedly plotting a coup d'etat. The European Commission also froze its direct aid to Malaysia's government last month in response to the political situation, saying it would not affect humanitarian aid but block about €150 million earmarked for infrastructure work.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.